Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Morning, evening, wherever. Happy Pride to everybody. Pleased to have you here. We've got a very special episode of Meet Your Makers today. Today, you may know her as the melodious tones coming out of your
Melodious.
podcast machine every week for Onyx Pathcast. Please welcome Dixie Cochran.
Hello.
Clap, 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 clap,
Clap, clap, clap, clap, clap.
clap, clap, clap. What, Dixie? Tell them what they might know you from specifically here.
Yeah, so I'm one of the full-time freelancers at Onyx Path. I wear many hats, you could say. I started out pretty much just as an editor. Did a little bit of development work. I was a house developer in charge of Exalted Chronicles for a while. I've transitioned away from that because, to be perfectly frank, I've talked about it on the podcast before. Managing other people is not my strong suit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very much like a give me a task and I'll do it person, more than a I have to figure out all the tasks person.
Yeah.
So luckily, folks on the path are awesome and very accommodating. And we found other places for me to be. So I write a bit, I edit a bit, and I do a fair bit of layout now. That's been my new thing. I'm very visual, so that's fun.
Yeah.
I also am one of the 4 rotating co-hosts for the Onyx Pathcast. So if you listen to our company podcast, you've probably heard me on there many, many times because I've been on there since 2018 when we started it.
Absolutely.
Which seems like a lifetime ago, but also
I,
like yesterday because
I love
time
it.
has no meaning anymore.
It's true. It's true. It's a flat circle, etc., etc. Yeah, nothing's the same since 2020. Uh, we're on. For anyone who is not familiar, this is Meet Your Makers, where we talk to the writers, developers, editors, artistes who make the games that we all love to play so very, very much. So, Dixie, I always like to start from the very beginning.
Sure.
What was your introduction to tabletop role playing? Where did you get started?
I got started really early and then I had a gap until high school. But my first role playing game experience actually was probably AD&D, I would say. Maybe, yeah. My mom's friend Kim played, and they
Hmm.
ran a game for all their kids. So they ran like an easier module for the kids sometimes. And she ran like a solo game once for me and my mom just so we could like figure out what it was. So I played a little bit when I was like 7, and then that just kind of ended for whatever reason. I don't even remember why we stopped playing. And then when I was 14, I went to high school as a weird little goth kid, and some people told me about this game called Vampire the Masquerade.
There you go.
Uh, and I was lucky enough to go to a pretty liberal high school. And it was officially sci-fi fantasy club because we weren't allowed to have role-playing game clubs because that rule was still on the books from the 80s.
Oh, sure. Yep.
This was in 99. So yeah. We had Sci-Fi Fantasy Club, and that was a thinly veiled role-playing game club. We would always put on a movie or something inside the trailer. It was one of those like modular classroom trailers.
Hmm.
We would put on a movie inside, and the rest of us would usually go sit outside and play on the grass. So I spent a long time pretending to be a vampire outside of a history trailer in my high school. And we played through a lot of different games there. We did the White Wolf games. We played the Sailor Moon role-playing game at one point.
Nice.
That wonderfully lost classic. I think we played in Nomine.
Oh, okay.
Just anything that was kind of alt from like D&D. Like we never really played D&D. And then in my 20s, I had a group that I played with every weekend. And when I say every weekend, I mean we went to my friend James's house and spent the weekend there every
Oh,
weekend
lovely.
and played like Friday night, Saturday afternoon to evening, Sunday before we went home. And like we would all buy all the food and everything, and he would run all of
Oh.
our games. And we went through I think everything White Wolf ever had published at that point.
Hmm.
And that would have been in like 0506, I guess.
Oh, that's
When I was like
fantastic.
2021.
Yeah,
So yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, long history of gaming. Currently my boyfriend runs the games for us, and I've also got several friends in my apartment building who play. I keep like finding people outside in my apartment complex who look like nerds and being like, "Excuse me, are you a nerd?" Because I am an extroverted nerd, so I just collect all the other ones.
There are little ways to profile them
Yeah,
and get them and if they're not, they're like, no, but people have always told me I am, and you could go, come with me, I'll take you
yeah,
to the dark side.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And like I'm super extroverted. I have no problem like being that person who's like, "Hello, I'm Dixie. Hi, do you want to do things?" Uh, I walked by my neighbor's apartment once, and they were on the ground floor, and
Mhm.
I their window is like this much open. So, but like I wasn't trying to look in. I just was walking by, but I saw like a DM screen set up and dice on a table, and I was like, I must meet those people.
That's it. That's it.
And then we played D&D together for a while. So
I
yeah,
love that. I love that. That's all. Honestly, that's all you have to have in common at a certain point. You're like, this. I mean,
yeah,
obviously, it can get bad, but as a starting point, you could do a lot worse than throwing
yeah,
some dice around. I love it.
yeah. And that's tabletop gaming. Obviously, I've done tons of video gaming since I was a kid. Like, I love many video games. The only ones I don't like are the ones that are hard for the sake of being hard.
I just don't get it.
I don't like that.
I don't get it. My podcast partner is a big Soulsborne kind of guy, just just loves those, and I think they're beautiful. And I'm a monster guy, so I dig that. But I'm more content. I'll just watch you play. I get too frustrated. I can't. It's just not interesting for me.
I have one weird exception to this, and that's that I got really into Baldur's Gate 3 since August. Obviously, like a lot of people did.
Oh sure.
I may or may not have over 800 hours on it.
Whoa! You're not messing around. It's a good game.
Exactly 6 days ago, I beat Honor Mode.
Oh wow! Okay, so yeah, all right. All right. Fair enough.
But I think it's because I have so much tabletop experience. Like I understand how the game works way more than I would something where it's like button combos. I know how to strategize a fight because I've been playing D&D since I was literally 7.
I think you know what, you're absolutely right, because it's all about perspective in that sense. Because like I've been playing Civ since I was a little kid. I played every iteration of it, and when I don't know if you've ever played Banished.
Yes, I love Banished.
I adore Banished. I play it all the time. More importantly, I play it when I'm drunk. And I've had people go, that's one of the hardest games. Like, it's such a frustrating, difficult game, and you're playing it when you're hammered. And I'm like, oh yeah, I guess that the hard for the sake of hards, it's all about perspective.
Yeah, because I love Banished. I love Frostpunk. I think it's, for me, when you're talking about like the kind of twitchy gameplay that you have to really hit things. Like, I love Hades, but I play it on God mode where it gets easier every time you die. It's just like mostly the like Souls type games are not for me. My boyfriend is currently playing Ghosts of Tsushima, and he's going to be playing, I think, Sekiro Shadows Die Twice at one point. We're on a samurai kick because of Shogun.
Sure, yeah, that'll do it. We're
on a weird samurai kick in our house.
I haven't seen it.
It's amazing. It's a really good show, and it's definitely like. They kind of flipped it around from the book to be from the Japanese perspective. None of these are questions that you asked me. I'm just telling you about things I like now.
Oh, that's what you're here for. You're making my life easier. What are you talking about? This is great.
No, Shogun's super good. So we watched Shogun, and then we watched Blue Eye Samurai, and now we're playing a Legend of the Five Rings game because my boyfriend just got obsessed with samurai stuff.
That's gonna happen,
and not in a weird weeaboo way, not in a weird like othering or exoticizing way, in a way that he thinks the culture is really interesting and the history is really interesting.
That stuff is cool, and it's we had Hiromi on the show not long ago, and we were talking a little bit about
Hiromi.
that. Hiromi is so cool, and it's just one of those things where you're like, we want you to enjoy this, we want you to appreciate it. It's just you got to go about it the right way, and
exactly.
I love that. I think that there's nothing wrong with that at all. So I'm right there with you. So what were some of your, now this is something that's interesting to me because I keep running into it with these game designers, especially. What is your educational background, if it's not too personal a question?
No, not at all. So I'm going to preface this by saying that I grew up with undiagnosed ADHD, and I am almost certainly on the autism spectrum. We're still working on that one. So with that in mind, I did great in school until high school, and then I didn't do well in school at all because I didn't like school. So I dropped out, got my GED, which I'm very open about, and think that more people should do that if they're not doing well in a traditional high school.
It's not for everybody.
Because especially if you plan to go to like a community college, they don't care as long as you have proof that you graduated high school. I test really well. So if I had known that I could drop out of high school, take 7 tests, and then just like have a diploma, I would have done that 2 years earlier than I did.
Oh my gosh. Get on with it. Get on with your life.
But yeah, I actually, I say only because all education is valid. I have a 2-year degree in arts. I'm not opposed to maybe going back at some point. It's not one of those, but I also don't have any college debt because I went to community college and it's way cheaper.
See, that's the way to go. But I only bring it up because For me, I only just recently, like within the last year, got my first freelance gig with Onyx Path,
Mm,
and I was up for one of the things that inspired the show was being somebody on the outside looking in, going, I would like to be a part of this,
yeah,
part of your world, and I wanted to get into that, and wondering, but it's such a specific strange subset of an already kind of niche hobby. And it's
yeah,
like, how do you, and the thing that I have found that is fantastic is that everybody's on equal footing when it comes to it's just about, are you good at this? You have, I have a degree. It's like, well, that's very well and good, but are you
yeah.
good at this? Can you edit? Like you were saying, like you're doing layout stuff now, and that's
Hmm.
very, very cool.
Yeah, but
uh
I have no background in graphic design. I just have background
right.
in enjoying art and like makeup. Like I understand color theory really well because I worked at
Yeah.
Sephora for several years,
Oh, there
and
you go. Yeah.
I've been doing art my whole life. So like I'm a very visual person. I enjoy it. It's hard though as somebody who does edit to not like read every word, which you really are not supposed to be doing when you're laying something out.
Yeah, that's hard. That's really
Uh,
hard.
but like a lot of the industry and what I think a lot of freelancers would say from many companies is that a lot of it's who you know, a lot of it's
Hmm.
networking. Like when it comes to submitting through the form, that's great, we do hire a lot of people through that.
Hmm.
But also it's not uncommon for, especially for like editors, layout artists, that sort of job, to just meet people and
Yeah.
kind of go from there. Like I said this before on the Onyx podcast, and I'll say here, I got really lucky in that I am very good friends with Rose Bailey and
Hmm.
have been since uh 2007 maybe. So I mean, I've known Rose for almost 20 years, and my first gig with Onyx Path was literally just because we were having a conversation, and I mentioned that I had finished college pretty recently. I wanted to edit. Like I edited my college's newspaper for 2 years. I was always like, you know, studying grammar and trying to get better at it, and
Hmm.
taking a lot of writing courses because you're a better editor if you're a better writer.
Absolutely.
Um, but we were just having a conversation, catching up because we hadn't talked in a while. This was in like 2015. And she was like, well, do you want to try something for Onyx Path? I'm always looking for more editors. And I was like, fuck yeah, yeah, of course. So my first project ever was the Demon Translation Guide.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
because it's relatively short. Usually, when you have a new editor, you give them something small to kind
Yeah.
of begin with. You know, I'm not going to give a new editor a core book,
Yeah.
and then kind of
Cut your
work them up
teeth.
from there.
Hmm.
Yeah, and for a while there, you know, she had a project for me when she was still in house at Onyx Path. Uh, just about every month or two, like she would, something new would fall into my inbox. So I was just freelance for about 3 years,
Hmm.
where I did it in my own time.
I think for anybody who is interested in learning a little more about designing tabletop role playing games that aren't just straight up D&D and all that sort of thing, I think going and supporting Rose is a good idea. Like checking out the Patreon she's got and all that. Like just the
All
level
her
of
stuff on drive through.
exactly the level of specificity and niche. You want to talk niche? Uh, that's still accessible and fun and interesting, and I've always been really impressed by it.
Rose like breathes game design.
Yeah,
She is
clearly.
always designing in her brain. To the point, we went bowling for my birthday a
Mhm.
couple months ago. In fact, I think it was all on Pet Freelancers. Um, and like I had to kind of feel like, can we not talk about work? Can we just
Yeah,
like not talk game design for these 2 hours that we're bowling? Because I am trying to have a good time bowling and like having a drink, and it's my
right.
birthday, and like game design is work, and I like talking about it sometimes, but sometimes I'm like, can we not please not talk about it like
Well, that's
for two
something
hours?
we run into that on this show all the time. When I talk
Yeah.
to, I'm like, what's do you have a game you're playing? What's the game you're playing for fun now? And they're like, what the fuck are you talking about playing a game for fun? Like that's not how it
I
works.
think I think the main reason that I get to play games for fun is because my boyfriend has a group of dedicated people he's been playing with, some of them since like middle school. Like he's known these
Oh
kids for
yeah,
forever.
yeah.
And they're very, very sweet, and they were nice enough to, allow a newer person into the group. And there's like 10 or 12 people total, and we try to keep games to like, four of us
Yeah.
at any given time. So like I didn't play in the Star Wars game they ran a while back, but I
Hmm.
did play in an Exalted Essence game,
Nice.
which, it's always fun to play in things that you worked on.
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
and we were about to start playing Claim the Sky, the superhero cyber system game.
Yeah.
And right as that happened, the samurai thing happened, and we were like we like voted to switch it to
Got thrown out the
L5R.
window. It's like, no, this is more important. I think we're gonna keep with that. That makes sense. I like that.
But I also worked on L5R, so I'm like, oh, it's another game that I worked on. That's
There you
okay.
go. That works out. No, now what about some influences that have kind of stuck with you throughout the years that you find keep popping up in your work? This doesn't have to be gaming related. In fact, I always find it interesting to learn a little more about the media influences, books, movies, TV. That
Yeah.
yeah.
Gosh, I don't know how much of it pops up in my work as much because
Mm-hmm.
you're usually writing to something pretty specific.
Sure.
And so, but that said, I know that when I was in college, I had a professor who looked at my poetry and my writing, and said like, "You read a lot of 19th century literature, don't you?" And I was like, "Yes." And he was like, "I can tell," because I was writing like sentences that were a paragraph long.
Right.
And
Ain't
really,
that transparent.
and really, that English professor is probably one of my biggest influences on writing. His name's Ian Sherman. I'll shout out Ian. I very very cool dude. Spoke like 4 languages, covered in tattoos. Like younger English professor, very very cool.
The cool English professor. Yeah.
He was super cool, and just it was a huge influence because he would say things to me that I will still say to writers, like, give yourself permission to write poorly,
Yeah.
because you can fix it later, but you need to get the words out, and sometimes you're gonna write something that sucks,
Mm-hmm.
and then we can tell you how to fix it.
Yeah.
It happens. Everybody has those times. It's better than writing nothing at all.
Yeah.
He was the one that kind of taught me that like short, punchy sentences have really good impact sometimes. You know, like every now and then a 3-word sentence is exactly what you need to punctuate a thought.
Absolutely.
And just stuff that I hadn't really articulated before that. As far as literary references, I did do an entire semester in college on Poe. I took a class where we all picked one author and researched the heck out of them.
Yeah.
And one thing that people don't know about Edgar Allan Poe is that he was actually really freaking funny. He wrote tons. He would write reviews of things, and he was like sarcastic and hilarious. One of my favorite pieces he ever wrote is called "How to Write a Blackwood Article." Blackwood was like a tabloid at the time,
Okay.
so it's essentially him like satirizing how bad the articles in Blackwood magazine were.
Sad spooky boy with a sarcastic sense of humor. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. And I mean, like, a lot of people don't realize that he had a fair amount of humor out there, and was just really, really smart. But between me and Josh Deitch, we'll make a product that is all Poe references, as seen in Josh's what's it called? Adventure he did for Beyond the Grave.
Yeah.
It is like just a straight Poe reference all the way through.
I love it.
Yeah, and of course now I live in Maryland, which is very near where all the Poe stuff happened.
I live 10 minutes away from Richmond's Poe Museum, so yeah.
I have a magnet on my fridge from the Poe Museum because my dad took me when I was like 9.
It's pretty cool. We gotta take my son there before he gets old enough to stop us.
And like that tells you about the kind of child I was. That my dad took me to both the Poe Museum and an MC Escher exhibit when I was under the age of 10.
I love it, and I'll tell you something that I keep running into with our guests here, because it gives me hope. Growing up in a military Southern conservative household, with a mother who did believe in the Satanic Panic of the 1980s.
Oh, great!
I literally had to hide my D&D books from her and everything like that, which of course made me love them more.
Of course.
Parents never get it, and so many of the people who've come on the show have mentioned, like, oh yeah, there was an adult who said, like, here, I'll show you how to play D&D and all that stuff. And that makes me so happy, because I didn't know that existed when I was like, this is just our little counterculture punker, 10-year-old thing that we're doing, right? Like, no, there are adults out here who are not nuts and actually enjoy this. So
yeah, no, I mean, I come by the being a nerd, honestly. Like, if anybody in Raleigh, North Carolina growing up until I guess probably the past 10 years, ever saw a big blue pickup truck running around with the license plate Red 5 Jedi, that was my mom.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
So no, both my parents are big nerds. My step parents are both nerds about different things. My stepdad's an artist. He does conventions. And and trading cards
Oh,
sometimes.
that's cool.
My mom was the queen of the North Carolina Renaissance Fair for many years, the
Oh,
one
for
in
Pete's
Raleigh at
sake.
the fairgrounds.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, like I come from a really nerdy family.
You've got excellent pedigree, is what you're
Yeah,
saying. Yeah, I love it. I
like
love it.
it would have been weird if I had grown up to not be strange.
It's just so funny. I just love that stuff. I love hearing those stories, and it's just because, again, it's with my family. It was just I feel like with my parents, as I've gotten older and my interests have borne fruit. Like
Yeah,
I was a stand-up comedian for years, and they were like, I don't know, and then I started actually touring and making money and stuff. And they were like, oh, okay. It's always things like that. And I always feel like my parents are supportive enough, but they it's like they're chickens that gave birth to a duck. You know,
yeah,
there's a similarity there, but what's up with your feet?
yeah, yeah. Whereas, like, I mean, some things have changed over the years, but as far as when I was a kid, like it was always very like, oh, you want to dye your hair purple? Well, I guess your grades aren't that bad, sure. Like you can dye your hair
Yeah,
purple.
yeah.
Like sure, we'll do your back to school shopping a hot topic, like whatever.
Okay, yeah.
And
That's
and
what you want.
and then I got a job at that hot topic when I was 16.
There you
And
go.
now where their this is a crazy detail to me. Where that hot topic was, Cary Town Center Mall, is now the Epic Game Studios campus.
That's pretty funny.
So the
That's
mall
pretty
is
funny.
gone, but now it's a campus for a service I also own. So I'm like, oh, weird.
That's Cary, and that's gosh, North Carolina really is. That's another state that's got a ton of role players and writers and stuff. Like Justin Achille was out in Cary for a long time, wasn't he?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He moved to my hometown. I was like, what are you doing, Justin? What are you
That's
doing?
so funny. That is so funny. So what? Now you mentioned before you have worked on basically everything that Onyx Path has done. What do you think is your favorite franchise to work on?
That's so
I know,
hard.
I know, I know. That's
Um,
where we're asking the hard questions here, Dixie. Strap in.
that's so hard. Um, I do. Okay, I have a deep and abiding love for Realms of Pugmire.
Oh, sure.
I edited the very first books for it back when I wasn't full time here.
Hmm.
I remember finishing editing Monarchies of Mal, sitting in an Airbnb for my friend's wedding the next day because like I
That's
need to go to
great.
the wedding, but I had a deadline, and I was like,
Yeah.
well, I'm gonna sit in here and edit, I guess. I really loved watching the initial Pugmire Kickstarter just blow everybody's expectations out of the water.
Yeah.
Um, and I have always really loved that world. And I think Eddie has said on record that he thinks I am the person who has thought about it the most besides him,
Oh, that's lovely.
because I really feel like I get the exact tone he wants and the
Hmm.
exact tone he was going for, and exactly how much of like the nostalgia and the wistfulness and all that goes into their religion, and like I have really thought about it, and it's extra funny because I'm not actually much of a dog person.
Yeah, I'm a cat guy myself, so yeah, but I love
Yeah,
that game.
but yeah, I love everything about it. I was so excited to work on both Pirates of Pugmire and Squeaks in the Deep. And then I worked on the upcoming Curious Cats of Mal that just
Hmm.
got funded on some platform or another. I can never remember which platform we're doing
You
what
can't
on these days.
keep them straight.
But yeah, so I think it was Backer Kit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I freaking love Curious Cats of Mal. That was super fun to work on. Uh, Writing character creation was really fun, especially because Eddie had devised that new like quick character creation rules for Realms of Pugmire. So
Hmm.
I got to kind of replicate that for cats.
Oh, that's
Uh,
fun.
yeah, and so I love working on that, and I also have to shout out all the They Came From games.
Hmm.
Um, when I write Pugmire, I like to sit down and really think about it and think about the world and the implications. And when I write Beyond the Grave, I have about a glass and a half of wine
Hmm.
and just let myself be silly.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
and
It's almost required, isn't it? Like it's yeah.
yeah, yeah. So like it's a very different tone, and I definitely haven't written for They Came From as much as I've written for Pugmire or worked on
Hmm.
Pugmire in general, but I do love working on it. But yeah, I have a special place in my heart for the realms because I worked on almost every book in that line in some capacity.
Hmm.
It's mostly just a few small supplements that I haven't really touched, but like I just worked on Threats and Curs. I'm working on all kinds of stuff. And yeah, yeah. Ever since I first edited the Pugmire core, I kind of fell in love with that cute little game.
It's
Uh,
fun. It's such a fun, charming world. I
it's
really
got so
enjoy it.
much depth to it though too, and that's
Yes,
what I always try to
absolutely.
harp on about. Is like if anybody hasn't read the Pugmire fiction collection, I will tell you right now. I said it before on podcast. I'll say it here. Josh Deitch's story made me cry, actual tears.
I actually have that on my wish list because you mentioned that on the Pathcast
Yeah,
once.
yeah.
I need to get it.
All the stories are good. They're all different degrees of like fun and adventurous and creepy and whatever. But like, I I am a fan of Josh Deitch. I've been a fan of his for a long time. I read Strangers in the Proportion. I loved it. I loved all of his work on The Secret World,
Mm-hmm.
and now he's doing more stuff with that. Like, I just think that Josh is really, really talented.
I
And
love that the Secret
yeah,
World is still kicking around too. I think that's really cool. That's awesome.
yeah,
Yeah. That's great. Now, do you find that when you're working on these games, you're working with the creators, as you pointed
yeah.
out? Does that? I mean, that's gotta be helpful, but at the same time, could that make things kind of extra stressful? If you're working on Pugmire with Eddie, this is his baby. You're working on They Came From with Matthew.
I think that because the industry is so small, you tend to just become friends with your colleagues.
Yeah,
And that makes it kind of hard to be intimidated by them. Like,
that's fair. Yeah,
they're people. Like, we're all people.
yeah,
And I love and respect them, and I love and respect their opinions. But I also know that they, love and respect me enough that if I have pushback or I have a question, they're fine with that.
mm-hmm.
Um, it was more intimidating at first, and that was mostly because I was working on White Wolf properties, which I had been a
Sure.
fan of for over a decade at that point.
Yeah.
And so that was intimidating to me. It was the first time that I got handed like a Changeling the Dreaming book to work on, and I was like, "Oh, it's the thing that I loved."
That would mess me
Um,
up.
yeah. I edited the 20th anniversary editions of Changeling and Wraith.
Yeah, that would have been a lot. I would have had an ulcer
Yeah,
by the end of that.
yeah. It was scary. It's more intimidating, I think, to work on a really established property,
Mhm.
mostly because the fans know what they want.
And there are always
And
going to
if you
be a
don't,
bunch of them out there who've read it backwards and forwards.
right.
And yeah, yeah,
And so working on Vampire the Masquerade was intimidating. Working on Exalted was intimidating. Launching Exalted Essence was intimidating because
yeah,
that was a project I really loved and put a lot of thought into. It's a project that Monica, Neil, the rest of the team worked super super hard on to execute the initial kind of vision that I had.
yeah,
And I'm overwhelmed that people are enjoying it. I'm really glad, but it was still scary to do because I was like,
yeah,
hey, I'm taking this beloved thing that a lot of y'all like, and I'm gonna mess with it. I'm gonna poke at it. I'm gonna
yeah,
change it a little. Yours will still be there. I'm not
yeah,
gonna get rid of it.
yeah.
But
Oh,
yeah, so like that's what was scary. Like not working with Rose because I knew her, but working with like Rich Thomas, who
sure.
who now I'm very close with, and I don't find intimidating.
Yeah,
But in 2015 I did because that was a name that was in my old vampire books once again from when I was a kid.
yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, that's what was a little weirder to me. Um I'm not one of those people who read role-playing game books cover to cover. I am still not unless I'm editing one. I don't
Oh,
find that
sure.
fun. Some people do. I
Oh,
think my boyfriend is
I'm
like
totally one of those. Yeah, I love it.
I think he is sitting in the other room reading L5R on his tablet to prep for the game because he can't be in the office for this hour.
Right,
Uh, but
right.
but but yeah, like I've never read them as entertainment. I've read them as
Mhm,
manuals, right?
mhm.
So I never really looked at all the names in the front of the book before. But then once I started working with these people, I was like, oh shit, like Eddie's been writing on vampire for decades.
Yes, yeah,
And it's just one of those people I didn't know his name, but now I do. And
yeah.
Dawkins was intimidating because he's a gentleman gamer. I had seen in some of his videos.
Dawkins is just, you don't even need to know who he is, and he just starts speaking to you, and you're like, oh no, I wasn't ready.
But but now like I love Matthew. We are friends. We have
Oh,
hung
he's
out at
wonderful.
conventions. Like
Yeah,
yeah. So yeah, it's hard to be intimidated by the very familiar.
yeah,
Um, I guess that when you are working on a new project with somebody, like we're talking about at the Gates recently, which has
hmm
like 4 days left on back market, I think 5 days.
hmm
Talking about the world below, Pugmire. When it's really somebody's baby, you just want to make sure that you handle it with care.
absolutely. Yeah,
And I think that's the main place that you really have to worry about respecting the material is you just want to like do the best you can both for the world and for your friend.
hmm yeah, it makes it more personal at that point. which also can bring out some of your best work, but it also, yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
but it's pressure.
yeah.
So, if you've worked on all these franchises, all these lovely, wonderful franchises, are there any games out there, any or even just franchises that might not yet have a gaming equivalent that you would like, kind of maybe not kill for, but maybe punch a random person in the street for?
I'm speaking this into existence right now. If anybody who is currently working on the Stormlight Archive game needs an editor or writer, I have read all the books many times, and I own all the minis, and I've backed all of the Kickstarters,
Light it up,
and
people.
I might be a Brandon Sanderson fan.
Make this
No,
happen.
I would love to work on any of the role playing games based on his work because they are doing a Stormlight game right
Mm-hmm.
now. Um, and anyone who knows me knows that I would love to work at anything Sailor Moon or Buffy related.
Sure.
I wish that the joke cover somebody put up a while back for She-Ra and the Princesses of Power, the role playing game, was not a joke. That would be a super cool franchise. So yeah, there's all kinds of stuff. I'm a big reader. I read a lot of historical romance, which there are a couple of cool role playing games out there that kind of
Mm-hmm.
center on that, like Good Society.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not exactly the thing I want to play with. I want to play with being like a superhero, like being somebody with powers and fighting things, and I really enjoy fantasy.
Yeah.
So that's probably the one that I've kind of like. I haven't figured out who to contact. I've kind of poked around the website, going like, "Are they hiring? They need
It's
any
a,
freelancers? Like, we don't have non-competes. I'm allowed to edit your books."
yeah, exactly.
But I did get to work on Star Wars, which was pretty cool. Like
Oh,
I
that's
have,
pretty cool. Yeah.
yeah, I've worked a little bit with Fantasy Flight before all the stuff happened with them. So I got to work on a couple of Star Wars books, and one of the coolest ones I got to work on was I think it's called Allies and Adversaries. It's
Okay.
just stat blocks for all the canon characters.
Oh, that's cool.
So I got to edit like Wookiees and specifically Chewbacca, and I got
Yeah.
to edit Yoda, and that was cool. Uh, so yeah, getting to work on anything like official Star Wars was neat because Star Wars. You just want to work on Star Wars,
I mean,
right?
come on. That's just because you're putting your stamp on something canonically that's inspired you
Yeah.
and that sort of thing. Yeah, absolutely.
And actually, I think the editing job that scared me the most, speaking of respect, was for Harlem Unbound, second edition.
Harlem Bound. Yes, absolutely.
Because I love Harlem Bound. Chris Spivey also lives near us. Um,
That's hilarious.
actually,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, Chris is local. And like he is a friend of my boyfriend's. It's great. At the same time, I'm coming into Harlem Unbound as a white person,
Sure.
and I want to make sure that editing it, I wasn't accidentally cutting context
Mm-hmm.
or anything else that was like important. So I did a lot of Googling editing that one to make sure that like people's names were spelled correctly, places were spelled correctly, because there are a lot of actual historical figures in that book, and a lot of unsung historical figures that I
Mm-hmm.
was honestly privileged to learn about. It was really cool.
Yeah.
But it was still an intimidating project going in, just
Yeah.
because I wanted to do it justice so badly.
Yeah.
And I think it turned out well. So
It's. I mean,
I'm happy with it.
that's a legendary one. That one's amazing. Chris is cool, people.
Yeah,
Was
Chris is
there
great.
ever any point that, like, as as a Caucasian person, that you like were like, maybe you should give this to somebody else or anything along those lines? Or
I mean, Chris asked me to work on it.
right?
And I figure that's his right to pick people. I'm not
Sure.
gonna sit here and say like, no, I shouldn't do this work for you.
Yeah.
Um, I think that because most of the writers or like the writing and art team was mostly POC,
Mm-hmm.
um, I trusted the project to be what it was.
Yeah.
I'm not going to question many of their decisions aside from grammatically. I
Yeah.
might occasionally be like, oh, that could be worded better.
Yeah.
But overall, that wasn't a difficult book to edit because it was so exceptionally well written. So yeah.
It's always nice when you've got enough talent that in your team that it makes the editing process super duper easy. That's always a good feeling.
Yeah, you definitely if you edit for a company long enough and you kind of get to know all the developers, you know when you're going to get a really clean, kind of easy piece to edit versus when you're not. I'm not gonna name any names,
Mm-hmm.
but there are definitely some folks out there who maybe just have stronger grasp of like grammar rules, which is fine. You don't have to have those to develop a game. That's not
Sure.
the case. That's my job. But like there's definitely folks who they turn something in, and I know I'll be able to go 2 pages of manuscript without making a correction, and then there are people who I'm like, oh, this is going to take me a little while. Okay,
Right.
like I'm going to need to be really careful with this one because this person
And,
doesn't catch typos as easily.
and that's where, and I think that's a great example of where that level of familiarity within your team is so valuable, because you know the writers, they know you, everybody. It's so you're able to time out your work a little easier, that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. Like I edit almost all of our tasty bits at this point because they take a couple of hours max. Usually, they're 5,000 words.
Right.
So yeah, those are pretty simple. The one thing I don't like editing, but I'll do it, but I don't love it, is when a book is mostly stat blocks.
That's yeah.
Just because I get bored looking at all the numbers and making sure that like a thing I do that not everybody realizes is like in those stat blocks, I have to make sure that like every colon is bolded because sometimes you find one that's not, and that annoys me.
Oh yeah,
And
that's
so
a
I'm just
lot.
having to like look over and over again at the words, power and attributes and whatever. And
Right.
like, oh god, this is taking me so long.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the worst feeling is when you open up a book that you worked on, the actual printed version, and find an error. And that happened to me with L5R recently. And I was like, no, I worked on this.
I get it. You're never
Oh
going to get them
no.
all. You're never going to get them all, but it doesn't stop you from like just really kicking yourself in the butt over that
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. No. I hate opening a book that I either edited or proofed and finding a typo. And you always find it immediately. Like
Yeah.
once you have the book in your hand. You're
Yeah.
like, oh, I will
yeah.
open this book to a random page. What
It's
the
the
hell?
first thing you'll notice. It's not, you're not even
Yeah.
you haven't even gotten to the point where like I wrote a book. You're like, ah, damn it! Like immediately.
Yeah. No, it's not fun, but
No. No.
it happens. Nobody is completely error free. It's gonna be
Sure.
hard to do.
That's
And
impossible. There's no getting around that. I
yeah,
think as a know-it-all little nerd kid who the only class I liked was English, I was always real proud of myself and real pat myself on the back when I'd read a professionally published book and go, that E doesn't go there or whatever, But
I'm not gonna lie. That's actually why I got into editing.
yeah,
Yep, I was reading a series of books I used to really like that got really bad after book 10. But I was reading them and I was finding typos, and we were talking about the like mass market paperback version. So these books had been through multiple publishings,
sure.
and they were New York Times bestsellers.
Ugh.
And I'm sitting here going like, how did no one catch this?
You had all that extra money, like to have someone go through it again, like
yeah, and I got real salty about it, and then I went to college and took every English course I could.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you're in the audience and listening now, and you're considering the reasons why or why not to attend college, if you're going to attend college, please remember to try and do it out of spite.
Yeah.
That's
no,
really, yeah.
No, I was in a really good place. I got like I had a really good local community college. I was living outside of Seattle at the time, and they had a lot of really awesome programs. And I went to college, and I took mostly as many English classes as I could stack, and then I took a bunch of communications courses because that helps with the English part.
Yeah.
And whatever sciences I had to take. I know a lot about rocks. I took geology 1 and 2 because rocks
Nice.
are cool.
Rocks are cool.
I took sociology. Yeah, just science classes that I could like feel like they weren't sciencey because I'm not like into chemistry and
What do they
equations.
call it? Then soft science, they call
Yeah.
it in academia. Yeah, soft science. Kind of vaguely insulting, but fair enough.
I did take anthropology. That was fascinating. I loved anthropology.
Oh, I bet that was fun. I never took
Yeah.
an anthropology class. I should have.
But yeah, I just like took all the little science classes that counted towards my credits to graduate, and then just kept making all my electives more English stuff. So
Just that's ultimately what that's the thing. My wife, we just had our first kid the end of last year, and it's one
Congrats.
of those things. Thank you. It brings all those questions that you don't think about, and I've decided that if frankly in 18 years college is probably going to be a completely different thing from what it is now, but if it remains mostly the same, I'm going to look at them and say, look, don't bother. Unless you want to be a doctor or something like that, just go to college for the reason most people go to college, to just meet people and take courses that you think are fun and interesting. Don't overdo it too hard. it's no, there's no point. What is a role-playing game that you think is kind of an unsung hero, like an underrated great role-playing game, and why is it Cavaliers of Mars?
I talk about Cavaliers and Mars in the podcast so much because I do love that game.
It's a great game.
Um, yeah, no, I'll happily say Cavaliers of Mars, another book that I edited, and wrote on for
Mhm.
the supplement that we did, the Witch Queen Citadel, whatever it's called. Yeah,
Yeah.
with Steffi Devan. She and I wrote that together, and I love everything about Cavaliers of Mars, and I think everybody should go check it out. I think honestly, I think so many of Rose's games are so good. I love Beautiful Anomalies.
Yeah.
Um, I'm gonna start blanking on the names and feeling really bad
Sure.
because I talk to her about these things all the time. Uh, what's her? I'm gonna look this up.
Do it.
This is how I am. I'm typing on the show. Miserable Secrets. That's the other one.
Yeah,
The,
yeah, yeah,
the,
yeah.
the Castlevania tribute.
I love that one. I think that's so neat. I've never actually played that one, but I've read it.
I haven't gotten to play many of her games, and it makes me sad because they're all really good.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I love everything that Rose does, and I don't know. I feel like the role playing game industry is in such a weird place in the past several years,
Mhm.
because you have like the one big publisher,
Yeah.
and then a lot of people will clump anybody that is a publisher as opposed to publishing by themselves into like the big guys, and
Yeah.
like we're not. We're like there's got to be different levels of like game studio, just like there's in video games.
Yeah.
And for some reason, a lot of folks seem to think it's like the people publishing on itch by themselves, which that's perfectly valid to do. I have no problem with that.
Absolutely.
Versus anyone that has a company logo on their products.
Yeah.
And I'm like, or like whose company is more than one person.
Mm-hmm.
And like there's such a wide variety. Like Paizo is much larger than we are.
Mm-hmm.
So is Modifius. They have a lot of their licensed projects. We're not doing as much licensed stuff right now.
Right.
Which I think is great. I love that we're moving more into like just doing Story Path Ultra games and doing our own games in house, like working on Scion and Trinity.
Mm-hmm.
The only licensed game I think we're super working on right now is Exalted,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm glad because I freaking love Exalted. But
Yeah.
yeah, like there's just so many different levels of like what tier of game designer, I guess, or like how much best support you have. And for everything but Cavaliers of Mars, Rose is one woman working out of her house, paying people out of pocket
Yeah.
to make these. And I am all for supporting her. I'm all for supporting all of the indie creators. I love that we have things like the Vault so that people can work on our games.
It's great.
Yeah. Or sorry, the Nexus and Canis Minor are the ones, not the Vault. The Vault isn't us.
Oh.
But yeah, so like I always talk about Cavaliers of Mars. I think it's brilliant. I think
I was making a joke for the I not that it isn't a very underrated game, but if there's something else that comes to mind, please feel free.
I don't know. Like, I feel like most of the games I've been playing recently have been accurately rated. Like, I feel like they're rated where they need to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't think I've played anything super recently that I would consider like underrated.
Nice.
I do think that people should look into, like I said, Rosa's stuff, and also I think that the second edition of Pugmire has made a bunch of really great improvements, and I don't know why it didn't do the like numbers of the first one. I kind of wish it had. Just because that game is so good, and Eddie worked his butt off like making the new version. And yeah, I also definitely encourage people to check out both The World Below and At the Gates in our new line of games, the Earthbane Cycle, because once again, like the campaigns are going well, but they're not blowing us out of the water or anything. Sure. And I think they should be, because I think these games are really good.
They are. They are. Yeah.
No, no.
It's interesting because At the Gates was a great example of one that on first glance I wasn't like, just like itching, champing at the bit to get into it. But then I got the Ashcan edition, and the more I read and the more I learned about it, I was like, this is freaking great. This sounds like a lot of fun. And there's enough that sets it apart It's a
Yeah,
fantasy world, yes, but it is not. It doesn't fall. There's nothing generic about it. It's very
right.
cool.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love world building. It's one of my favorite things in fantasy books. That's
Yeah,
probably why I'm such a big Sanderson fan, is because I think that his world building is top notch.
it's pretty
Um,
solid. Yeah,
well, because like I understand how the magic systems work in his games, and I understand why they work not his games, in his books, and I understand why they practically work in the world that he's created.
hmm
And I feel that way too about the world below and at the gates. Like I feel like the settings inform the mechanics, and the mechanics inform the setting in a very wonderful, delicate balance.
hmm
And both of those settings are very specific. Like
yeah,
the way the like striations of the world below work, and going down deeper levels is safer, like that all makes perfect sense to me. The nations of at the gate have their wonderful various political issues. They also have a war going on, and there's just so much going on there that I know that both Danielle and Matthew put a lot of thought into. I have recently been shown the Earthbane Cycle World Bible because I had questions, and it's long.
yeah.
Like it's got a lot of setting in there, and I'm very, very happy that it's there. I know that Danielle's At the Gates World Bible is also pretty intense, from what
Yeah.
Steffi was saying on the podcast recently. But yeah, no, it's so much thought gets put into these, and it can be kind of frustrating. And I'm speaking only for myself, not for any of my fellow creators. But it can be kind of frustrating as a creator to see something that just has a license that people have nostalgia attached to do like mad numbers,
Yeah.
and then something that a bunch of people like poured their hearts into as their passion project, whether that is a like indie creator or a more like mid tier game, just kind of
hmm
go like, oh, it's fine, people like it, but not everybody likes it. It's not doing Avatar: The Last Airbender numbers. And
Right.
while I love Magpie and I'm glad that they had that
Oh,
success,
they're cool. Yeah.
like I want that success for games that are new and fresh and aren't based on a property.
What do you
Um,
think is what is something that we as game designers could be doing more when it comes to introducing new worlds and because that's the key, isn't it?
mhm,
Like you got something brand new. How do you really hook
yeah.
people? Without nostalgia.
And I mean that's the hard part,
Yeah.
like you can sit there and say like, oh, it's like all of these things, like we've been I been shouting at all the various JRPGs that inspired At the Gates, and so
Yeah.
you'd be like, oh, if you like all of these things, you'll probably like this too. But liking all those things doesn't mean you necessarily want to play in a tabletop game inspired by
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
Like uh marketing is kind of impossible right now, just and that's not just for us, that's like every company is having trouble with marketing at the moment,
hmm
because of everybody uses ad block and doesn't want to see ads and hates ads. Like
Yeah.
if I'm scrolling TikTok and I see the word ad at the bottom, I immediately scroll away no matter what it is.
Yep.
Like if I see a promoted post on Facebook, I'm like, nope, get out of here.
Yep.
And I think that's just kind of where people are. Like people are tired of being advertised to. I think we all got kind of used to not getting advertised to when streaming became the like big thing,
Yeah. Yeah.
versus cable TV. Um, so like ads are difficult finding, like where are people? Like it's not like there's a great concentration of gamers in one spot aside from Gen Con.
hmm
And if you're not doing those big conventions all the time, which cost a lot of money for companies to go do,
Absolutely.
if you're not doing those all the time, then it's like, where do you find these concentrations of gamers? And it's just not, it's not easy right now.
Yeah.
I think anybody who's trying to market anything will say that marketing is rough at the moment,
Yeah.
because look at that kid.
I know. She sees my notebook open on the desk, and therefore she must sit on it.
I'm surprised none of mine have interrupted yet.
Thank you, baby. You're helping the show. You really are.
But yeah, so like yeah, it's hard right now, and I mean these are conversations that we've had internally, just trying to figure out that exact question, which is like,
Yeah, yeah.
how
I
you like.
realize now that I asked you to solve the problem
I mean,
solve the issue right now, Dixie. Please help us out.
I mean that's part of why we started doing the Ashcans, was
Mm,
as a way for people to spend $5 and see if they wanted the game, and you get a complete playable little game
yeah,
in what we hand you. It doesn't have everything, obviously, that the core book's going to have, but it has enough that you can play a little game, and that's part of it. But like, yeah, it's rough. We have banner ads on RPG Net. We have
mm,
stuff on various social media sites. But once again, people are really savvy about that and they don't want to see ads. So
Yeah, I think and Onyx Path has always been very good too about recognizing the chance to promote people who want to do actual plays and stuff like that. It's like, are you playing our game? We will tell people about it. Like,
yeah,
we want to get the word out. And I think that's funny because it's because there are people who look at a team like Onyx Path and go, well, they're the big guys, et cetera. And you're like, okay, they're no team has ever been so open to responding on social media, to getting back to people, to getting people involved, and that sort of thing. It's one of the reasons I was so attracted to Onyx Path in the first place.
yeah. We try to be transparent. I mean, Rich writes the blog every Monday. Like
Yeah,
he does it by himself. The we've also been putting out a release every Wednesday for years now. Like we put
yeah,
out something every single week, and I think that's cool.
that's very cool.
But also, Onyx Path only has 4 permanent employees. I'm not one of them. I'm a full time freelancer.
Right.
Like me and Eddie and Matthew and Danielle are all full time freelancers. We have freelance contracts, just like anybody else does. It's just that they last for a year, and we get paid monthly instead of per project. If I'm doing a lot of projects, sometimes I will say this one falls out of the scope. Can I get a separate contract for this? That's fine. But like, it's only 4 people. Like, it's not, it's not a big company. We don't have an office. We all work out of our homes. And yeah, like we do this because we love it. I think most people who are in the role playing game industry would say that.
Absolutely.
Because unless you're Hasbro or maybe Paizo, I don't know the Pathfinder numbers. I know that they made a lot of their money off the video games too recently.
Yeah, Paizo's probably not hurting too bad.
Yeah, but like no one's WotC, no one's Wizards of the Coast, and I don't know if anybody ever will be. Like, there are a lot of great game studios out there, but
and maybe that's better.
Yeah, maybe.
It's it makes it a lot harder for these games to lose their soul, to lose the reason that we love them so much in the first place.
It's true, but what if I had Barbie money?
I know. I know. I'm with you. Honestly, that's as good a note as any to end it on.
A little depressing at the end there about marketing.
I want Barbie money, Dixie Cochran. We're putting that. That's the next. That's how it goes.
I'll wear that on a shirt. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want Barbie money.
I don't blame you. Well, please, Dixie, tell them where they can find you or anything that you're working on that you want to shout out. Let me know.
Yeah, you can find me on all social media as Dixie Cyanide. I'm also always in the Onyx Path Discord. It's a great place to talk to me. I think that the best thing to do would be to tell you that At the Gates is still crowdfunding as of this live show in the next few days. And also come to Onyx PathCon June 14th through 16th if you want to find out what I've been working on. Because we have a lot of very cool panels. A couple of which have been announced and contain some titles that I'm not going to say on the air, but you all know. You all know what I'm talking about.
Come on.
So yeah, 14th to 16th, Onyx Path Virtual Con. We will be doing all sorts of panels on all of our games and also having some little after party Jackbox action in the evenings. Grab a glass of wine, come hang out, or a beer, whatever. You don't have to be wine, but whatever you want.
With me, it'll probably be wine. Yeah.
Yeah. But so yeah, definitely come hang out, chill, see all the panels, see some actual plays. That's the best place to find out everything that's been going on recently. And if you want to read my work, it's scattered throughout our books. If you put in my name and Drive Through RPG, it'll tell you all the ones I wrote on.
Bingo. I will also be at Onyx PathCon. I'm going to be emceeing some of the panels and maybe even getting to play a little bit, which is delightful. So come check me out there. Otherwise, you can find me on Pixel Lit, the greatest podcast dedicated to video game novelizations, because it is the only podcast dedicated to video game novelizations. We have cornered the market, and we're damn proud of it. Come check us out. But in the meantime, in between time, guys, thanks so much for coming out. Thank you, Dixie.
Thank you.
And we'll see you guys next time.